what we bring to bear in the market, having been in Ghana for upwards of almost 30 years through our financial institution partners, is a global world view of what's happening across the world, and also reminding us that as Ghana, while we are achieving a lot in electronic payments, we are part of West Africa, we are part of Africa, and we are part of the whole world. So what are some of the insights we can share with GhIPSS as we collaborate and move forward to drive the agenda of digitizing payments, not just in Africa, but in Ghana? We've commissioned certain studies which we want to share with you in brief, just some high points, and then we're going to share with all of us an overview of how payments are trending. Some of those points have been covered already. So moving along, we're going to see a map we are familiar with. And that is the rising star, the black star. And you can see that it's highlighted out of the map of Africa because there are certain trends we have seen that show that Ghana is progressing and the populace that payments are servicing is a responsive citizenry, people that can adopt technology and the trends that are coming up globally. There are some statistics on that slide which we'll see just now. These are statistics you can get from many sources. But what it tells us is the demography of our country. Exciting that over 50% of the population of over 26 million people in Ghana are within the ages of 15 and 54. Young population ready to adopt technology. Now there's something else about the population, which is that over 50% of the population resides in urban centers like Accra. So there's a concern we have about distribution. When you look at the 10 regions in Ghana, how well are citizens in the different regions able to access financial services and payments? We did a research recently with Moodys Analytics last year, which was widely published. We just want to share some insights from that. And basically, what we discovered, and this also speaks to a point that Dr. Seton mentioned earlier on, which is with regard to the number of jobs that electronic payments is creating. Now, the study that we carried out with Moodys Analytics looked at a few key areas. Next slide. Payments are actually driving the GDP of the country, and not just the GDP of the country, but also the enhancement of the lifestyles of individuals in the country. So there are benefits to consumers and merchants. We also have a key area we pay attention to as Visa, and in our collaboration with GhIPSS, is also an area of discussion to ensure that payments are safe. Of course, we saw the last presentation, the issue of trust. If I don't trust the way I'm paying, if I feel I'm not safe, I will not use it. So security is something which Moodys Analytics study highlighted as an area of comfort for merchants once that is in place. Transparency, access, and convenience. Now, focusing on Ghana in this report, because this report actually looked at multiple countries, about 70 countries, and we found out that between 2011 and 2015, an average of 2,820 jobs were added to the system because of electronic payments. But that is just scratching the surface, because despite this achievement, out of the 70 countries studied, Ghana was still low in the list with regard to use of payment form factors, such as cards. So imagine if more and more people, institutions adopt electronic payments, more jobs will be added. In terms of GDP, believe it or not, $50 million. It looks like a small amount, but it's also significant. Without electronic payments, we wouldn't have seen that input to GDP and then the livelihoods of people. In addition to the commissioned research with Moodys Analytics, we also had an index we launched. And I just want to talk about that index briefly, which is called the Africa Integration Index. It's been running for 4 years now, and what that index seeks to measure is the level of connectedness of Ghana to the rest of the world. Remember the slide that showed the map of Ghana extracted from Africa. So how well is Ghana connected to countries in West Africa? How well is Ghana connected to countries in other regions of Africa? And how well is Ghana connected to the rest of the world? So insights like these are the ones we're bringing to the Bank of Ghana, we're bringing to GhIPSS. We want to share these ideas so that as policies are formulated, as new technologies are implemented, it ensures that GDP growth for the country is improved and livelihoods of individuals also improve. So 4 areas were covered by this index, which was released in the first week of May this year, the 4th edition. The first one was trade, movement of goods and services. If you are an import-dependent economy, clearly the citizens would suffer in the long term. There has to be a balance. We found out that the more you have exchange of goods and services within a region, the more prosperous you would become. But how do you facilitate exchange of goods and services easily? Electronic payments. Another variable was capital. The third one was information and data. And that's something that we heard from Sheikh Job in his presentation about what do we do with data? How can we mine data? What information can we extract from data? Because you would be able to have an electronic payment mechanism that speaks to the lifestyles of people if you understand their life cycle journey. How can you know their journey? Data, if you can interpret it. So this was also a variable that served to be very useful. Then the last one is people. What were the 5 critical findings in our last report? We found out that in Africa, Ghana and Zambia stand out. When you look at the period of 2011 to 2016, goods sold out of Ghana to the rest of the world versus what Ghana imports. So there's progress, but there's still a lot of room to grow. We also found out that amongst all the 19 countries that were reviewed, we noticed that if you are connected regionally, Pan-African connections stimulate greater growth versus the global. You need global, but we need to also focus on growing regionally as well. Then we also found out that certain countries were not responding as fast as others to opportunities to grow, but Ghana was one of those that stood out. Now let's look globally. Next slide. There are 2 categories of people when it comes to payments. There is the payer and there is the payee. All of us in this room are payers. So you have your cards, you go out to pay, and then you have the payee who is the merchant to accept cash. Both categories of people have problems. Some of them have been covered by the various presenters. So on the side of us as consumers, we find out that it is cumbersome to carry cash. If I have a card, the communications to me from the bank that gives me the card might lead me to the wrong behavior. It's a debit card or a credit card or a prepaid card, not an ATM card. So if the communication to me is that it's an ATM card, I'll go to the ATMs. It doesn't help my life. So that is a problem for the payees created by the wrong communication. For the payers, rather. For the payees, terminals are too expensive. And that has already been covered in the previous presentation. Then we're in a world, globally, the trends show we have numerous disruptors. We won't talk too much about that because we've also had that covered. Let's now go to Africa. What are the trends we see? All of us in the room have heard about M-Pesa. And we've also heard about them coming into other regions, including Ghana. Then, of course, we're familiar with the mobile money service offerings that are all over the region and the country. All of these things point to P2P money transfers being a major trend. And if you can move money from one person to another, anybody can be a merchant. So if you're sending money to me, I can be a merchant and give you value, goods and services. We know the story. Then, of course, B2C is business to consumer. Then what many people are concerned about is, what is the consumer experience? You have a product, you know what it does, But how does the product look to me? Is it attractive to me? Does it make my life easier? Can I carry out transactions very fast? And that is part of the reason why GhIPSS from GhIPSS is gaining a lot of traction, because of the speed and the convenience. So the question now is, what kind of user experience do the various innovations we'll come up with have? And there are multiple insights in our relationships with over 15,000 clients globally that, of course, would bring to bear. We have found out people are very concerned about what happens after the traditional forms of payments. So what is the form factor? Cards are a form factor, a vehicle for payment. Beyond cards, what happens next? That takes us to this slide that just emphasizes the position that when you look at cards, what comes next should drive everyday usage. That is your first triangle on the left. We find out people have cards, but we also notice that many of the cards are not active for spend, and part of the problem is, where do you spend? So acceptance is a challenge. The middle triangle lets us to know that in Ghana right now, yes, we have terminals, but many of the terminals are located in the high-end retail stores. What about the open markets? How do we ensure that people in those locations, small businesses, are able to accept payments as we move from a cash culture? And then the last triangle lets us to know that, like the point that Dr. Seto mentioned, you might have over 10 million accounts, but some of these accounts, or a chunk of them, are double accounts. So who are the real people within the country that have access to financial services? So one thing which is critical, and it has been mentioned already, is interoperability. Infrastructure that enables various players with novel solutions to talk to each other. And that's what Visa is all about. Making it possible not just for you to carry out transactions anywhere you're located within Ghana, but also beyond the borders. So while the infrastructure is in place to facilitate that communication amongst institutions like GhIPSS has achieved, because we know the journey has begun, and we're looking at 10 years now, going forward, there are huge opportunities to ensure that any form factor or payment instrument within Ghana that you utilize has global relevance. And that interoperability is what Visa will bring to bear in this collaboration. So mobile access is what we see. When you now add mobile access to an agent where you can get cash from, you might have that mobile offering in silos, different organizations offering those services. But then interoperability, next click, is what will give us the transformational impact. So mobile is that form factor that we're eager and keen to support. And that is the next level we mentioned beyond plastic. That mobile interoperability. Every single person here in the audience has a mobile phone or two or three. And it's part of our lives. And because it's part of our lives, and we use it beyond just sending text messages, being on WhatsApp, making phone calls, we have various apps on our phones that speak to different parts of our lives. How about making payments? And that is why we recognize that this is the very next level. And like Dr. Seto had mentioned earlier on, we are going to start witnessing a lot of wonderful innovations in this space that will entrench that convenient payments on digital into our lives. The next slide describes this migration. What we are used to is pool payments. Pool payments where you take your card, you present it on a terminal. When you insert it in the terminal, the owner of that shop will pull information about you from the bank that gave you the card. And there are some challenges there. But the world is now moving to push payments. So this is the next level of technology that we'll be looking at in Ghana. And of course, we're going to see how that pans out. Push payments, I tell my bank, I am the person I claim to be. This is how much I want to spend. This is the merchant I want to make the payment to, and I push the money to them using technologies such as QR codes and the like. Multiple applications for push payments. Next slide. Person-to-person transfers, disbursements from government, business to business, loading your prepaid card, cash deposits and withdrawals, leveraging the agent network. And like we've seen, we have over 143,000 in the country that can now double as merchants immediately, raising the number of acceptance points overnight. Then the next slide basically shows us the experience of that push payment technology based on mobile. In Africa right now, we have several countries implementing. Rwanda is live, Kenya is live, Nigeria is going to be live, Ghana is going to be live as well, Egypt is live, India is live outside of the continent. So it's a trend which is going to be all over the place, and we're going to experience it as well. So we're not going to dwell on this slide. It's a bit technical and I could take time. And then there are multiple use cases. We're going to skip that as well because of time. On global interoperability, remember when we started, we said, we are celebrating tonight a success story in Ghana. But ladies and gentlemen, it's the beginning of a journey. There's a lot to be achieved, and there's a lot more to come. Ghana is part of West Africa, part of the world. So globally, this is what we see. This is what we want. Whatever technologies we implement must have global standards, so that every citizen of this country who carries a form factor from here is a citizen of the world, is not disadvantaged, and is secure and protected. For merchants, we want a situation whereby they're able to be onboarded with underwriting that is in line with standards and policy, but is affordable as well. And then there will be reduced risk. The next slide basically gives you comfort of the partner you have. We're talking about history, evolution of payments. Excellent story started in 2007, which was the same year that we introduced tap and go technology, Visa PayWave. But this graph even takes you all the way back to 1958 when the story started. And then 2015 is interesting as well, because those of us here in the room, almost all of us use phones based on Android technology. Some have iPhones based on the technology from Apple, the iOS, and then others have Samsung phones. We have gotten into alliances with them to ensure there are global best practices all of us in the country can leverage. What is our vision for Africa? Starting with Ghana, of course. Next slide. Drastic reduction in cost of growing acceptance. Ensuring universal capabilities. We want a situation whereby all the practitioners in GhIPSS, in the Bank of Ghana, and other regulatory organizations, they have world-class understanding and tools of what it takes to establish the framework that will be enduring. Like Sheikh said, that strong foundation, that the house built on that will be one that will stand the test of time and all kinds of storms, including risk and fraud. We want digitization to be affordable, and we want an agnostic solution. So it's not just a Visa story, it's not just a GhIPSS story, but we're talking about collaboration. So there's a lot of room for growth for the overall benefit of Ghana. In summary, growing economies is the noble goal. We want a situation whereby the country can experience tangible impact of payments, where people's lives can be enhanced. Beyond payment, other things like credit, having access to that, insurance, having a savings culture, being a saver. We are going to include more people financially so that they can experience this and the overall economy will grow. We cannot overemphasize security. Security is not just the responsibility of GhIPSS or the responsibility of Visa, it's also the responsibility of financial institutions and us as consumers. Beyond the tools, how much do we know about keeping digital payments secure? That is an area of focus for us in this collaboration and journey. Innovation is also key. In people's garages, new things are coming up. By the time we come for the 15th anniversary or the 20th, the slides will change with new innovators. What we need to do right now is ensure that we are part of that journey and we're able to work together. And finally, financial inclusion and literacy. They are separate, but they're intertwined. A lot of work is going to be needed with regard to education. What the results are going to be for Ghana will be tremendous. By the time we launch our Africa Integration Index, the 5th edition, I expect to see Ghana rise. But to get to that point of having a Ghana that is interconnected to West Africa, well interconnected in depth and breadth to Africa and the world, is going to take a whole lot of education. We're ready to work together in that regard. That's where the literacy comes in. So let's do our best as individuals and electronic payment practitioners to be advocates of electronic payments. Every single one of us should depart from the culture of ATM card to a culture of making payments and spending. If we can adopt that within this closed group, then of course the future for Ghana is and remains bright.